Speechless, we're glad to have you. We're live from SPNN in St. Paul, Minnesota. Now, last week we had a great show, and it was so good, and a lot of the responses that came up back from the show prompted us to dig a little deeper, to find out a little bit more about what's going on in family law in Minnesota, in our courts, and more in particular, people want to know more about the stories of the people we had on the show. So we're going to do that today. Of course, David Carlson was with me as the major guest last week. So we're going to dig deep. And so David, thanks for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate
it. As I started out last week, Channel 9 ran your story about a year ago, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and personally, I think they did a really good job. They hit a lot of the major points about what's going on in family court, but we need to dig deeper because they hit it and a person would go, boy, is that a problem? What is that problem? What are 50-year restrainings? What is removing a judge? You know, what are these parenting consultants? What are these psychologists? How are they all ingrained in this? Mm-hmm. And that's what we're going to dig deeper on because they just touched the subject. I thought they did a good job. Some of the information was incorrect, but that's what happens. You know,
it was about as good as you can hope, and I thought it was.
And I want to commend Channel 9 because they ran these stories, and they're the only channel that I know that is running these family law stories. And they are egregious. And I mean, if anybody else wants to know, you know, you're not alone out there. So I would encourage you to call in. And I apologize last week for the caller who called in. I was told about it, and then I just totally blanked it out. So there's the number, 651-3, I can't read it. 361-8161. Getting old, to say the least. But David, so we're going to just start out with the clip, the first one. So Dallas, do number one, and then we'll get going from there.
All we get in our newsroom is from parents, many times fathers, who don't believe they're getting a fair shake in the family court system. Problem is, for an outsider, it is almost impossible to figure out who is telling the truth in a child custody case. But tonight we want to explore one very specific issue, the use of a parent's mental health record in family court, and how, for one Marine, the most difficult conflict he'd ever face would be the war at home.
All right, so mental health issues, fathers getting a fair shake. I mean, Channel 9 was highlighting this issue of mental health records and stuff. Now, we're going to have a lot more clips, but you think that accurately summarizes what's going on in your case?
I think so. There's a playbook, and you see it, as I mentioned last week. You could find it in the Angelina Jolie, Brad Pitt case. There's other, whether it be celebrities or just, regular, common guys like us, where if there's not issues that warrant the removal of a child or children, then they have to find a way to create those. And the easy thing to do when it comes to having a veteran involved is to use the service as the "see, I told you so." And in my case, I have a fairly honorable service record, and was on some pretty high-level deployments. I had a top-secret clearance, and there's really nothing there.
So the government trusted you?
I was on the Commanding General's security detail for 1st Division, 1st Marine Division, and 1st Marine Expeditionary Force. So I was with, for a short period of time, General Mattis, who's the Secretary of Defense. We had General Dunford, who's the current chairman, the Joint Chiefs, and the Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Neller, with my group. So my platoon was in charge of taking, whether it be Governor Plenty when he came, Senator McCain, or other dignitaries, Condoleezza Rice, Secretary Rumsfeld at the time, they would come out, and my unit was responsible for keeping them safe. So you could say that there was some vetting done prior to even being able to get on that detail, and that was what I did for my 4 years in the Marine Corps. So I had a special duty through my infantry service.
Yeah. Do they do psychological evaluations in order to get those jobs?
Yeah,
or
if they
just
you could, in the Marines particularly, you could tell the guys that are, a little
sane and not
yeah,
sane.
there's, and when you're dealing with dignitaries and high-level officials, you need people that are cool-headed and make good decisions, and they felt that I was one of those Marines, and I would say that I absolutely did everything in my power to be the absolute best Marine and leader that I could for my unit and my platoon, and I have a very honorable service record, particularly in my combat. I have no regrets. I did nothing that I regret. I did the right thing always, and that's reflected in the record.
Right. So, what, Dallas, we're going to play the next clip, number 2, because this gets into the whole issue of the courts, family law courts, fishing for information through mental records, and especially when there's nobody's saying anything's bad about you. So let's play this clip.
But you have no criminal record.
No.
There's no history of domestic violence here.
Never.
But you have a judge who thinks you have some mental health issues.
Yep.
There you go. So how does the judge think you have mental health issues? In this case, is this Judge Millinacker?
This would be Judge Millinacker at the time.
Ramsey County?
Ramsey County at the time. Well, the first question is what qualifications does a Ramsey County judge have in the mental health field or in the psychiatric field?
So is she a trained psychologist?
Absolutely not. She's got a JD and was a lawyer prior to being appointed to the bench.
Well, what did she say brought her to her conclusion that there's a mental health problem?
Well, first, when my daughters were taken in October 2015, I was ordered to complete, quote, a psychological assessment, end quote. I was ordered to complete a parent assessment.
Right.
And I was ordered to go to the safety center known as FamilyWise in St. Paul. And those were the 3 conditions that I had to do in order to regain my custody. So I did do the psychological assessment. I chose Dr. James Trillo, who...
On your own?
On my own.
You were allowed to choose?
At that point, there were no restrictions on who I could speak to as long as they were licensed, qualified, and had the proper credentials for the state.
So that's not cheap?
No, and Dr. Trillo, at the time, and until recently, I'm not sure if he's retired, but he was the Surgeon General for the National Veterans for Foreign Wars, VFW, organization. So he was the Surgeon General of the VFW, and he is a widely known expert on PTSD. So if you were a judge who wanted to know if a guy who's served has PTSD, Dr. Trillo would have been pretty much your first pick. He'd have been your first round draft pick. He'd have been the #1 overall pick, in my opinion. That was why I chose him. He was someone that understood veterans. He understood the issues. He understood, guys that got problems, and he recognizes it. And I felt that taking someone with such a high-level expertise and such a record, he's been submitting reports to courts for decades. And I felt that doing that was...
He should be good enough.
Why not? I mean, he's nationally recognized.
What prompted Judge Millinacker to make you go there to a psychologist?
Well,
what did she say? I mean,
did
she have any findings of fact, any conclusions?
At that point, there were none. It was just the accusations from my former spouse that I have PTSD because I served 3 combat tours in the Marines, and therefore, as a machine gunner in combat, I must have combat-related issues. So she claimed that through my service that I have these issues, and no one knows of them yet. So she had requested.
But your ex-wife knew you. Another psychologist? Is she a psychologist?
No, she's.
So did she know whether you had them?
No,
Okay.
she's even less of a psychologist than probably Judge Milnacker.
You had before. Did you have joint physical custody?
Yeah, we were married. We got married when I was in the Marines, and
Okay.
we had.
But after the divorce,
50-50.
joint physical custody.
We started in family court. She didn't want that. I was, the presumption, between 20 and 25%. She'd requested from day one that I have under 10%, which
Okay.
was more than, half of what the presumption for any parent in Minnesota was. And I went through the family court system. It took us 4 years to get divorced just because I wasn't being given parental rights from her. But the judges that I had at the time, I described them as several similar to Judge Judy, and they just weren't playing those games, and they upheld my rights.
Well, what judges were those?
Judge Bohr was the final one,
Okay.
but Judge Allshouse, both of those women were a completely different demeanor than Judge Milnacker. They were very questionable of her motives. They saw that this is a contested divorce and that people say things in contested divorces to get the upper hand, and they were skeptical. And since they made me do a prayer and assessment, the county came to my house and everything,
Sure.
and they found that actually the kids did better in my care than they did in the mom's care, and that's all reflected in the Ramsey County reports from 2010.
But you're not trying to take
No, I never asked
the
for
mother out of the picture.
I never asked for more than 50-50 because I always felt that it's important for both parents if they're good parents and if they have the best interests of the children in mind. I couldn't imagine wanting to take away my daughters from their mother unless there was absolute necessity to do that. So prior to any of that, I've never asked for more than 50-50. I never asked for less, and I never asked for more. I said all I wanted was equality, and I didn't feel that I should have anything more or anything less. And that was my stance throughout the entire process. So we were divorced in 2012, and I was granted 50-50 and equal parenting time. And to that point, I was in that range of equal parenting time for their whole lives. So from their birth in 2006 until they were taken in 2015, I had, out of 14 days, I had 6.5 to 7 every 14. So it was as close to 50-50 as you could possibly have.
So based on your ex-wife's allegation of PTSD.
Substantiated by her husband and her mother. Those were her two witnesses to the guardian ad litem.
Okay, so they tried to give evidence.
They gave testimony to the guardian, her mother, and her new husband.
That you had done things.
No, just that they thought that.
Oh, that's all they said.
They just validated her.
So they were just name calling. He's got PTSD, and so the guardian doesn't go, well.
Well, the husband, Mr. Dickinson had said that I didn't love my kids, and that that was one of the things that was in the reports was I just used my children for show, and that I didn't actually love them. And that was one of the allegations the guardian had put in her report. So those were the types of things that I was being accused of. And the main thing that she'd said was I wasn't, quote, supportive of her as a parent, end quote. So based off of not being supportive of her and being a combat veteran, those were the two issues that she brought to the court to even reopen what was a closed case from 2012 till 2014.
Okay.
It was closed. We had an agreement.
What I hear going on right there is what I call name calling. And a lot of people do this. A lot of people do name calling, but then, so they can say you weren't loving or supportive. Okay, well, how is that? How am I not being loving or supported? Give me your evidence. And so you see this in court hearings and court cases where they just name call, and that's enough to get a court order changed. I mean, it's like a judge has an agenda too.
Well, prior to that,
so the judge knew you were military.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you see any evidence of her being anti-military in what she said or did?
I never took her to be very supportive of the military, to be quite honest.
Based on what?
I would say just infidelity while I was in Iraq, for example. that was the area that some people had talked about while I was deployed.
Uh-huh.
There were, you know, I was hit. You know, I'd been struck multiple times in that relationship.
Uh-huh.
You know, but as a Marine, you know, infantry, you know, much bigger than your spouse. What do you know? It was just something. It was a stigma with, you know, men don't get abused or men don't get hit,
Right.
and you know, I was a victim of it, but you know, it's a nameless victim, and you know, the main thing for me was keeping custody of my children. So if I had to, you know, keep my mouth shut on that just to keep the peace, that was my main goal, was to keep the peace, was to keep the arrangement how it is. I didn't want more time. I was fine with 50-50. I would always take more time. I would take them 100% if that was what was
Right.
necessary. But you know, at the time, I was looking to just maintain my custody and maintain, you know, my life with my kids and continue to grow as a man and as you know, my professional life, and you know, take care of my responsibilities to my children. And I essentially left her and her, you know, new husband as much alone as possible.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't communication at soccer games. There
Yeah,
wasn't.
let's not make it
I
worse.
sat on one side and she kind of was on the other, and it, you know.
Well, this is something that people don't understand about domestic violence,
Mm-hmm.
is that by all the studies that I've read, women abuse just as often as men do.
Mm-hmm.
They do it in different ways, but just as violently. And you tell that to people and they go, no way, that's not true. Well, they believe in these, what I call old wives' tales, because we'll tell the domestic violence industry, this is part of their violence, is that they will tell lies and exaggerate in order to benefit and get money and get funding. And yet all these doctorate educated women that have done all these empirical studies, they come up time and time and time again, well over 300 studies, women abuse just as much as men do. And you know what? The women know it.
And I want to take a step back. Prior
Okay.
to her going and retaking me to court in 2015 in Ramsey County, since she lived in Anoka County, she went and sought a harassment restraining order in Anoka County, and she was granted one. I fought it and lost in trial, and she took that order and then went to Ramsey County and entered that into the family court order and said, see, he does have PTSD, I have this order. So that was, and that's a common tactic, is
Right.
you get the HRO.
So what was the restraining order about?
We had issues with parenting time. I wasn't getting, she was withholding them, and I called for police escorts.
Okay.
I did it on multiple occasions.
Which is totally
Which is what I'm told to
permissible
do.
and allowed.
You don't go, you know, especially in 2013, 14, you know, I was very cognizant of, you know, I don't want to be the guy knocking on the door where someone could say, oh, he's aggressive. So I chose the path of calling the Blaine Police Department at the time and calling them and saying, you know, it's my time to get my children. I'm not being given them, and I need assistance. So on 4 occasions, they had sent out squad cars to their house to try
You
to.
had the court order in hand, and they knew it, and they said this is his parenting time, so they were helping out, following the judge's
Well, they, you know, they said that,
judge's
and they said
orders.
it's a court issue. It's not a police matter. So they documented it with their report, and you know, those were the cold days in 2014.
Let me tell you this: if a judge puts out a restraining a warrant, it's a police matter. But if a judge orders parenting time, oh, it's not a police matter; it's a court issue.
And prior to
okay,
the-
they're both judicial orders. So one we enforce, one we don't.
It's selective choice of which laws we enforce and which laws we have no ability to enforce. And that was how
Which
it
is a
happened.
bunch
Is
of baloney.
these police reports started to add up quickly, and actually a very interesting point. I'd filed in Ramsey County.
But you want to set a record. You need to
Yes,
have it
I
on
would-
record that you
I'm
were,
a record
you were
keeper.
denied parenting time, which is a felony.
And I'm a record keeper, so I kept that record. And I actually filed. I remember the days. I filed on January 22nd, 2014, for help in Ramsey County Family Court. that was when I got assigned Judge Milnacker. On the one day following that, on the 23rd, she filed for her harassment restraining order. So I filed in Ramsey County one day for parental help, saying that I'm being denied my time, and I am left with no other recourse, so I'm going back to court for help from the judge. And the next day, she sought a harassment restraining order in another county, and then that completely turned the tables, and everything at that point became...
And those are ex parte orders, so the other side isn't given. You asked for a trial. You had a trial before the judge?
I had a trial before a different judge, Judge Jasper in Anoka County.
Okay.
And it was a he said, she said, and she found that my ex-wife and her husband were more credible than my story. So she found me guilty of the order.
Of showing up for parenting time?
I was allowed on the phone, apparently. On her Bluetooth. He testified that he could hear me in the house while her stereo had the Bluetooth on in the garage, and that I was aggressively yelling or loud, and that the judge found that made me aggressive and put the harassment restraining order on. So that was April 2014.
But there's nothing in the law that talks about aggressiveness.
No, and so this is where it gets real interesting. So this is April 22nd, 2014. So within a month or so later, we were the judge who ordered that also ordered us to go to mediation. So then we go to mediation, and it's a couple $1,000s more. Yeah. We go to mediation, and we come up with a mediation agreement. I still at that point was at 50-50.
Right.
And she said, I will take off the harassment restraining order if you give me half of your parenting time. You allow us to move the children to our new school district, White Bear Lake, where we've moved, and I had to drop my case. And those were the conditions for the HRO to be dropped. And reluctantly, I didn't think I had another choice, so I signed it. So then that order from the mediators went to two counties. It went to Judge Jasper in Anoka and Judge Milnacker in Ramsey. Judge Milnacker signs it. Judge Jasper does not sign it. Never issues an order of why she didn't sign it, but she never took off the order.
Wow. So
I lost everything that I'd made, and it was a quid pro quo agreement. There was an agreement that I was giving up this and getting this.
If the other side didn't meet their obligations.
Contractually you would think that is the way it goes, but that's not.
That's an important scam. I mean, because that's one thing that needs to be written down. Senator Limmer says he wants to hear all these bad things, you know.
I don't think Senator Limmer has much of an interest in hearing.
He's going to hear it.
Well, I think he's hearing it now.
He promised me.
He's hearing from people like me and other parents that are disappointed in the leadership in the Republican caucus in the state Senate and the Democrat caucus as well. But Senator Limmer chairs the committee. As you know, the State House, the Civil Affairs Committee or whatever it was last week. The House Committee passed it, and then it went to Senator Limmer for
the Judiciary needs to hear it,
and he refuses to bring it to a vote.
Yeah,
he absolutely
we'll
refuses.
talk about that in a little bit, but that's one of the examples that he needs to hear. You got an order, and a judge doesn't do it, and they see so he sees the game that's going on.
So I brought that up in my federal suit.
He can help them up. So we got a bunch more videos to finish your story, so let's go to video number 3 here.
According to police reports, the officers didn't believe Carlson, thought he was coaching his daughters, said the allegations were unfounded, and even considered charging Carlson with falsely reporting child abuse. Based on that, an Anoka County judge slapped him with a 50-year harassment order that will keep him from seeing his daughters until the year 2066.
So there you have a 50-year restraining order because you went and were recording the girls telling you about them getting slapped in the back of the head.
Well, I'm a mandatory reporter, as you know, under state law. Teachers or other medical professionals.
And it doesn't matter if it's your kids or somebody else.
And it wasn't just my kids. My daughters told me that the special needs stepsister was also being struck more than one of my daughters. So I did what I thought the proper thing to do isn't just me saying what I heard, but I recorded. It was the first time I ever recorded anything on my Apple phone with the mic, and I didn't say anything to them. I didn't tell them I was doing it. I didn't tell them what to say. I just let them talk.
Well,
and
here's
the rest happened.
Here's the big thing out of this, what I got out of this story. Well, one, listening to the recording, the girls were not coached.
No.
Not at all. It was so natural. They knew you were a loving dad. They weren't afraid of anything. There was
They trusted me. I was their father, and I was always there for everything.
And they were so honest in what they were saying. And to hear this police report saying you were coaching the daughters is just a bag of lies.
Obstruction of justice. It is. And they didn't just threaten to charge me. They recommended to the Anoka County prosecutor to charge me with filing a false report. Twice they've done that. Lino Lakes Police, on 2 occasions, have informed the Anoka County prosecutor, who also was defendant number 2 in my federal case, Anoka County. They recommended that I be charged with filing false reports. The only reason I was never charged with it is because I, as a licensed teacher, I had an obligation and an ethical duty and a legal duty.
Well, they're
to
supposed to
report
sort it out.
You know, so then what you do, you take the tape, you go to Child Protective Services, and I gave them the audio, I gave the police the audio, and I actually had set an appointment for the next day when I picked my children up again to speak with a female police officer and a mental health professional from Lino Lakes, and I was bringing them to the police station. That never happened because she kept them from me that weekend, and then from that point on, Millinacker was involved, and I had steadily, for the next month and a half, my time had went down, and when October 2015 came, I lost 100% custody. I went from 50 to 0. Absolutely no contact. And I went through the next 4 months. You know, my daughter, this was Halloween week of 2015. They were expecting I was picking them up the next day, and we were all going out for Halloween. And I've never picked them up since. That was October 26, 2015. Yeah. And I've never picked them up since that day.
Right. Well, it's appalling to me. So the police, not going to support your parenting time, and then when they actually have evidence of physical violence against him and in an inappropriate way. I mean, was this parent, your ex-wife's husband, was he ever ordered to take parenting classes?
No, the only person who's been ordered to do anything in my case is me. Neither her or her husband have ever been asked to do a psychological assessment, parent assessment, any assessment. The only assessment that's ever been asked of anyone in this matter is me, and I did. And then that assessment was deemed, quote, cursory and lacking, end quote. And that's where we are. I'm the only one that's
by Judge
Millinacker.
By Judge Millinacker. Yep. Has she had a psychological evaluation?
I think she should. She was removed from family court. She was sent to civil court, and I've been told through the grapevine that the Fox 9 story and the atrocious details of my case.
Now, sometimes there's, they put people on 2-year rotations. Was that part of it? Or?
I don't think so. I think that, when I went to the chief judge of Ramsey County in 2016, 2 other parents who had Judge Millinacker saw what I was doing, and through their lawyers, they also, they told me, had filed to have her removed during the same time period. So I think the heat just got hot.
And that's no consolation.
No.
That she gets removed.
No, because then I got Judge Leary, and Judge Leary is arguably as bad or worse.
He is an egomaniac beyond.
It's hard to be worse than Judge Millinacker, but Judge Leary is a pretty close second. He's, for your viewers, he's a judge who had the Philando Castile case with the cop.
And in my opinion, he threw the case.
Judge Leary is...
Judges can throw cases by what they allow in and what they don't.
And what testimony they deem relevant.
The appellate court is very wary of overturning a district court judge.
Judges do not like to step on other judges' toes and decisions.
Okay. Yeah. So let's go to clip 5. This is talking about your health record and the court wanting a health record. So We'll see this.
It would also be used in his custody case in Ramsey County, where Judge Robin Millenacker told Carlson if he wanted to see his kids, he needed to sign a release for all his mental health records. According to court transcripts, Judge Millenacker told Carlson she was concerned whether you have some mental issues as a result of the traumatic stress you endured.
You believe the judge and your ex wanted to go on a fishing expedition.
Absolutely.
In your VA records.
Yeah, I think that was the only.
Looking for something.
When you've got nothing else to go off of, you've got to go off what you can use. And the easy thing to go after people who've been a veteran is to go after combat.
Yeah, so did the Judge Millenacker already have that one psychologist, military guy? She already had information from that guy saying no PTSD.
She did. So this date is February 11th of 2016, and I was in court twice that day because I was also jailed for 8 hours from her on this day.
Okay, so we're going to get into that in a little bit.
So in the morning, Guardian Ramona M. Olson stated on the record that I hadn't completed any assessment and I hadn't been cooperative with the court. I had several people from the VA in attendance in the hearing. They raised objection that I had. I called for a recess, was granted 20 minutes, and Dr. James Trilla had stated he is in his office and waiting for the court to call to confirm my participation. The guardian ad litem went down to her office downstairs and came back with a report and said she did actually receive a report 2 days prior and asked if the judge would like her to read it. So she proceeded to read the narrative and the recommendations, which all were in favor of me. And then her next statement was, quote, "I'm not a child psychologist, or an expert on children. However, Your Honor, I don't find that this report is credible or good enough," end quote. And Judge Millenacker said,
Olson,
yep,
Ramona Olson.
Guardian Ramona Olson says she doesn't think it's good enough, and Judge Millenacker says, I agree, I don't think it's good enough either. So that report,
and
which
they never said why it wasn't good enough.
Yeah, no, they did. Ramona Olson, who is also not an expert in children, mental health, or any of the relevant areas, stated she found the report, quote, cursory and lacking, end quote. So she found, as a non-expert, that
but that's name calling again. What was lacking?
She didn't say.
Well,
she didn't have to.
That's my point. Yeah.
So then Judge Millenacker says, you know, do you have anything you'd like to say in objection, Mr. Carlson? And I began to systematically.
You objected?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I tried to have it admitted on my own. I had I'd gotten a copy during the recess and asked that it be admitted into the court record, and I was denied multiple times. The judge gave me a few minutes to state my objections before she closed the hearing. I started to go after the guardian of what she hadn't done, and I was cut off mid-sentence by Judge Millenacker and ordered held in contempt of court and jailed. And I was jailed from about 9:30 in the morning till about 5:45 p.m. In Ramsey County Jail.
A tactic that judge used. So
thuggish.
Were you
thuggish tactics.
Well, let's run clip 6 here.
Judge Millenacker said Carlson, who was representing himself in court, kept interrupting her. She held him in contempt, and he was taken into custody. He was held for 5 hours, taking these pictures of himself in the holding cell.
One thing I find real interesting about this is you still got your tie, you got your phone, you got your belt. I assume they didn't take anything from you when you were in the holding cell.
Not at that point. They didn't find me as threatening.
That's the first thing they're supposed to do.
I was not, you know, there's multiple witnesses in the court that provided affidavits as well, and I submitted that to the judicial standards. They did not, they literally, I wasn't loud, I wasn't disrespectful.
For interruption though. Interrupting, right? That's
Again,
what she said.
That's what she said. But if we had the audio and we could, which we don't at the moment, but if we did,
and we don't have a camera because there's no cameras.
There's no cameras allowed. But if there was, and if you would have been there, you'd have heard her say, "Mr. Carlson, would you like to state your objections at this point?" And I began. Within 30 seconds, she stopped me and held me in contempt.
So that would be in a transcript someplace.
That's in a transcript somewhere. And then when she brought me back after about 5:30 p.m., The only people in the court were, I was surrounded by deputies. She had about 6 Ramsey County deputies surround me, and she had a pre-filled VA form to release all of my records to her and my ex-wife's attorney, filled out for me, and threatened me with 90 days jail time at the Ramsey County Workhouse if I failed to comply with the records. And that's where she said that she thinks I'm mentally ill, and I stated if I was mentally ill, I can't sign this release, and I must seek counsel because I'm so mentally ill. And I mean, that was on the record, and she didn't have much of a choice than to give me a chance to seek counsel and speak to the VA, and that's what I did. She gave me 14 days, or said that she could have me jailed in 14 days if I didn't comply. I spoke with the VA, and I tried to talk with some lawyers, and I decided that that was not in my best interest, and I did not comply with giving all of my medical records, as I thought. An interesting thing is that when Ramona Olson said Dr. Trillo's report wasn't good enough, she said, I would like him to see one of 3 court preferred providers to do his assessment. And that was what was ordered. And at that point, I thought,
him being you need to go to one
I
of
need
the 3
to
court,
go see
court provided.
One of 3 court
Government
preferred.
provided.
No, not government provided. I still am paying.
Okay.
Government court preferred. Preferred providers.
All
So
right.
these providers are often given to parents in Ramsey County, the same 3, and there's 4 that I've kind of ascertained that have been used at a very high rate, which doesn't seem very clean considering how many mental health professionals and medical professionals we have in the Twin Cities, greater metropolitan area, for 3 people that aren't even in St. Paul to be the only 3 that she'll let you see. I thought the hit job was in on me, and I thought that doing that assessment was going to be the nail in my coffin, because it's one thing for me to say that a judge is out of line and that the guardian's unqualified, but the minute I do their report, if I felt it would come back strongly against me, and then now I'm calling an expert unqualified, or that they're lying, or they didn't do their job, and then it's, well, Dad, you need to look at yourself. Clearly, everyone says that you're the problem, and I felt that it was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, but I knew that if I didn't see them, I still had a fighting chance of getting my kids back.
Right.
If I went and saw them, those would be the nails in my custody coffin. I'd be nailed shut.
From the experiences of mine and other people that I know, you're exactly right.
That's been validated lately, and it's a small consolation to know you were right. But I'm proud of myself for, after being jailed for not 5 hours, but about 8 hours in a cell by myself in isolation, and being surrounded by deputies, and a judge telling me that she's going to jail me for 90 days. I was pretty proud of myself to hold my ground under those most extreme and stressful and strenuous circumstances, which no one should have to go through.
And then after that, what happened next? We're gonna play the next clip here, because it's not just being arrested; it's the intimidation afterwards. So let's watch this. I'm sorry, 6A.
But what I saw that day was, holy cow, somebody's standing up to me.
Eric Wettenberg is Carlson's therapist who was in court that day.
She made him come back out to the bench, threatened him with 90 days of workhouse or jail if he didn't comply, and offer a formal apology to her on the record in front of the bench.
He had to do that.
He had to do that to get out of jail that day. Yep, 5 hours later.
He had to formally apologize to the judge.
On record.
Something that I assume he didn't want to apologize for.
Yeah, talk about intimidation and using your power from the bench, right?
Did that come off as a power play to you?
Hell yeah, for sure it did.
I was not surprised to hear this, because Larry uses the same tactics, and he used them on me. But this was the constructive contempt of court. Okay, and so here's a judge being the prosecutor, the jury, and the judge.
Do you want to know one thing that she said, that another reason why she held me in contempt of court? She said that I attempted, quote, to intimidate the court with my stare, end quote. And she also accused Mr. Wittenberg, who you just saw in that clip, of also attempting to intimidate the court with
Wittenberg?
his stare. So
But
both
now
Wittenberg and I.
this is a second psychologist. When did he come into the picture?
He was my therapist from the VA. He was the person that I was seeing on a regular basis. Trillo was just someone that I'd never met before that I came to do an expert analysis. Wittenberg is a licensed therapist who is someone that you see on a regular basis. So
Okay.
Trillo wasn't someone that I'd ever met before. He'd never heard of me. I didn't hear of him.
Okay.
We had no contact prior. He was an expert, independent analyst. He
Okay.
was what you would want to give to a judge to end this madness. And if it wasn't for Mr. Wittenberg being there and raising objections that I had, in fact, on everything the court had asked me, I might not have even been granted that brief continuance to prove that I'd done a significant psychological assessment that found me to be completely fine.
So here's what I'm getting. You were embarrassing the judge. You were checkmating her at every angle, and she was getting embarrassed. So
I wasn't
she was
intentionally trying to embarrass anyone.
absolutely not.
That wasn't.
Somebody gives you an accusation, you have a right to defend yourself.
Absolutely.
But when she's the prosecutor, which so many of these judges end up being in these civil law cases, in these child custody cases, they end up being the prosecutor instead of a neutral party. This is what happens. I mean, so defend yourself, you're in trouble. You don't get to defend yourself.
Well, Judge Millenacker's sister is also a preferred provider of Ramsey County, Dr. Michelle Millenacker, who Judge Leary has had recommended for parents to see. Ramona Olson on multiple occasions has recommended that parents see Dr. Michelle Millenacker, who's the sister of Judge Robin Millenacker. If you don't think that is a conflict of interest, a conflict of ethics, if that isn't something that screams corruption or
Michelle
something.
Millenacker should be in a different county, different judicial district.
No, she's
and
Ramona
kinda
Olson.
2 districts away.
I know over a handful of parents who've all been told, who had Judge Leary, and guardian Ramona M. Olson had stated that they had to go see Dr. Michelle Millenacker. I have evidence, I have parents, I've got transcripts, emails, I've got parents ready to come. They were told by Ramona Olson to see Dr. Millenacker if they had Judge Leary. If they've got Judge Millenacker, they substitute Dr. Millenacker with the LICSW, master's level.
LIC, what's that?
She's equivalent to Mr. Wittenberg. She's just a therapist. She's not a PhD or a PsyD.
Right.
So you've got a guardian ad litem who is sending parents to see one of the judges that she's frequently in her courtroom. She's sending parents to go see a judge's sister for their expert analysis. And I haven't found one parent who saw Dr. Michelle Millenacker or any of the other court-preferred providers who had any favorable reports ever rendered from any of these providers.
Well, the interesting thing here is then these other parents lost
everything.
Custody, everything.
Everything.
Don't get to see their kids either.
One of them hung himself. Some of them have given up. Some of them have walked away and said, my children might come find me at 18, I hope and I pray.
And if the parent is still alive.
If they're even still alive.
No, and one isn't. It's devastating.
It's devastating. He's a veteran. He was a sub-commander and a St. Paul firefighter. KARE 11 did a story on him and his family, and it's a tragedy. I was in the safety center with the widow, and I'd seen the kids, and I could see the issues that they were having with going through this and going to a safety center where, mom or dad is wanded and grandparents are wanded, and people walk around with a clipboard. There's no toys for anyone over 3 or 4 years old.
You can't even bring a Bible in there.
You
can't read them the Bible. You can't do the normal things you do with your kids. I mean, this is a constitutional crisis right there.
This is a racket, Tim.
Right.
This is a definition of a racket.
Well, let's get to another part of the racket, and that's your health record. So let's go to clip 6B.
Judge Millenacker then directly ordered the VA to release Carlson's mental health records. But the Department of Veterans Affairs refused, citing privacy to release the records or even talk about Carlson's treatment.
There's a reason, and I'm a veteran myself, and there's reasons that there's HIPAA. There's a reason that our mental health records are protected by the Department of the VA, because we don't want our experiences out there to have a judge who has never met us or understood us to pick apart somebody's opinion from 8, 9, 10 years ago.
So when he's talking about experiences out there, I mean, so you know the federal law pretty good on this.
I do.
So why don't you give a description of this federal
28
law?
USC 7332 is confidentiality of certain medical records, and it states that veterans have right to their medical records, and they can only be forcibly given from the federal agency to a district court in certain circumstances, and those circumstances have to be weighed by the Secretary of Department of Veteran Affairs, who's a presidential level cabinet appointee.
But you are already, the judge has 2 experts saying there's no PTSD.
In addition to my primary doctor at the VA, and in addition to another professional at the VA, I'd supplied 4 VA letters that said I was fine, and an expert psychological analysis, and a parent analysis, and all of that. I don't even think you can find that in the record, because Judge Millinacker and Judge Leary would not allow any of that to ever be submitted into the record. So if you were a fact finder,
right,
and you went and looked through my file, I'm not sure that you would find any of that, because it wasn't allowed in at the time, and I wasn't allowed to put it in either.
And that's what I was talking with Senator Limmer, and saying you need to go through these court cases and hear what these judges are doing, because you will not be able to write good laws until you find out what the real experiences are in this courtroom. And, you know, and he agreed, okay, you give me that stuff. That's another area where judges are purposefully, and we see this, if they're throwing a case, that's what they do. We're not going to allow that information in.
How do you not allow expert testimony that would make the parent that you are depriving of rights, that says that they're completely fine and you should stop the deprivations? That is selective evidence. A judge is supposed to be an impartial arbiter that's weighing the law and ruling on the law, not deciding that this parent's expert analysis that says I was wrong isn't good enough. And that we want you to see one of the 3 preferred providers. I was lucky I wasn't sent to Dr. Michelle Millinacker. To be honest, I'm surprised that they didn't try to pull that one.
All right, we got 4 more video clips. I want to get through these 5. So let's go 6C.
But under recent changes to state law, family courts evaluating the best interests of the child must also now consider the physical, mental, or chemical health issue of a parent.
Your professional opinion, there is nothing that should be keeping David Carlson from seeing his 2 daughters?
Zero issues whatsoever.
He is not a threat to them or anyone else?
Well-rounded citizen. He's the guy they give you the shirt off his back. He really likes helping people. His daughters were the world to him.
Well, okay, there you have it. That's tough stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and listening to that audio, you can tell that you were that dad.
That was my life. I mean, I didn't have a dad growing up. I took it as the most serious job that I'll ever have, and those girls are my life. And if they ever see this interview, I hope they know that I'm doing absolutely everything I can, and there's other people that are working hard like you to bring justice. And you know, I love my kids. I miss them. My message to them would be to keep doing good and keep working hard. And you know, I ain't gone anywhere. I'm here.
Yeah.
I ain't going anywhere. I'll fight this all the way to hell and back. I will.
Yeah.
I'm not going anywhere.
All right, let's see 6D, video 6D.
Carlson's also been seen by psychologist James Turilla, the Surgeon General for the VFW, who diagnosed him with an unspecified anxiety disorder, but said his parental rights should resume immediately, and he should not have to go through supervised visitation with his daughters.
I was a machine gunner in the infantry, so I saw a lot of things that, you know, aren't the type of things you necessarily want to see in life, but they're also not the type of things that ruin you or damage you.
Yeah. I mean, we've already discussed this, but
People
to a
that are in mass
judge
shootings,
to ignore all this?
People that were in a mass shooting a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a month ago, 6 months ago, they all are experiencing PTSD, and none of them are losing their children.
Right.
Why is it different for veterans?
Right.
Why are we not taking children from parents that have been in a mass shooting and say, you just saw some horrible things, I want your kids? We don't do that. No one would consider of ever doing that.
Right.
But they do it to veterans. They do
Yeah.
it every day.
Well, and I know how traumatic the divorce cases are, and there are people out there saying, hey, you have traumatic legal syndrome. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, they're not saying that but people get traumatic
Yeah.
legal system and they're shut down. Well, the guy that commits suicide, how many parents commit suicide going through the court system?
Quite a bit.
A lot of them do, and that's not you. I mean, I've known you all these years. That's not me, you know.
No one's dancing on my grave, Tim.
Yeah.
And,
So
that's not happening.
it's
I don't intend on going anywhere.
It's just a game that these judges are playing for political, financial reasons.
And when you fight back, it makes them so much more mad that you just didn't take it and
Yeah.
run away with your tail in between your legs.
Right.
But you know, when you're educated and you know the law and you're an informed citizen, you know, you're able to you defend yourself.
All right. Let's go to 6E. You asked for the judge to be removed. Here,
Yeah,
let's see
you're
this
right, I did.
video.
Carlson filed a motion to remove Judge Millenacker for bias, but she denied the motion. He filed a lawsuit in federal court against Ramsey and Anoka County, saying the judges violated his constitutional rights. A federal judge dismissed the case for lack of jurisdiction. He then filed a complaint with the Minnesota Board of Judicial Standards, but the board had no authority. Case dismissed.
Well, the board doesn't have any authority to remove a judge. But
I didn't ask for removal. I just wanted an investigation.
That's the scam that the Board on Judicial Standard plays.
And they meet in secret. They are not a publicly elected board. They don't meet in public, and they don't reveal what they use to make those decisions. It's something you'd find in North Korea.
And
really.
I told Senator Limmer, I said, Senator Limmer, your responsibility, our Constitution, the legislature, you're supposed to oversee these judges. Are you getting copies of every single complaint that comes into the Board on Judicial Standards, because you need to be getting
Well, you
that
know who you
copy.
complain to about your judge.
Who do you complain to?
You complain to the judge.
Okay.
The judge that you're complaining about.
For removal of a judge, you got to notice the judge.
You notice the judge that I want you to leave.
And that's what you did.
I did.
And then and when the judge refuses,
the
judge has to have a hearing on this, and they got to issue findings of fact.
Judge Millenacker didn't have a hearing, but she issued
Wait, she's got to have a hearing on
She didn't have a hearing. She found that
she's got to hear
it.
your reasons.
She denied it, and I never had a hearing.
And she's got to have a written order as to why it's being denied.
She issued an order, and the next day I filed a supplemental affidavit to the chief judge of Ramsey County.
Which is what you're supposed to do.
Exactly, yep.
And the chief judge did what?
He gave me a hearing, let me speak for an hour, which I at least appreciated having the opportunity to speak, finally. And I laid my case out. He relied on the Board of Judicial Standards and Millenacker's own denials, and he found that
Board of Judicial Standards said it didn't have authority, so how could he rely on the board?
That's a good question.
That's just, I mean, you read these orders, folks, and you can see them covering up. You can see them going there and just saying whatever they want to say. And you go, what in the world is this? What did they just say? Because it's nonsense. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Okay, let's go to 6F here and play that.
So you have some anxiety issues, but you don't have any major depression, no suicidal ideation, no violent or criminal history.
I have nothing. I'm just a regular 35-year-old, Minnesota guy who loves his kids and served his country.
It's almost impossible to know what's really happening in this family torn apart, or what two 10-year-old twins might be thinking of the father they haven't seen for a year. Carlson says he has no regrets about his 3 tours in Iraq or serving his country. It's just coming at a price he never imagined.
I look at pictures of my kids, I don't even recognize them. I mean, 2 years is a long time for little girls. And Dad's been gone, and they're growing up without me, and they've they've essentially killed me off.
There, I just really goes to the soul, because you hear so many parents say, I'm dead to my children.
Yeah.
It's as if I am dead because they can't see me.
Yep.
And it's almost worse than a death.
It is.
Because you're still alive.
Every minute you're haunted.
And it guts your soul to hear that. And
it's not just me. Grandma's been killed off. Auntie's been killed off. The friends, the neighbors, the uncles, all the people that they've grown up to love and depend on. We've all been killed off. It isn't just me. It's all the other parts of the family structure that are. That's what tells you it's not just a matter of David's a bad person. It's David's family and needs to die and go away.
Right, right. Well, we're out of time. Not surprising. We got through most of the stuff here.
We could be here for 20 hours and still wouldn't fit it all in.
Yeah, but we got a lot in, and just one thing, was a hearing in the House last Thursday.
There was. I testified
on joint physical custody and maximizing a parent's time with their children as much as possible. And Deborah Hillstrom was fighting against it tooth and nail, and she was just shot down.
I shot her down when she asked me a question. She asked me one question, and she didn't ask me a follow-up, put it that way.
Well, we're out of time. Remember, if you don't stand up for other people's liberties, who's going to stand up for yours? And good men don't do nothing. And David, thanks for your service.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on again and going over all this.
Yeah, all right.
Appreciate it.
You said